in 2014, the state of Utah commissioned a study through UDOT. In that study, they found that if we did nothing to address the transportation constraints coming out of the Uintah Basin, over a 30-year period, there would be approximately $29 to $30 billion lost in opportunity.
Hi everybody, welcome to the County Seat. I'm Chad Booth. Today we are going to talk about railroads and petroleum, natural gas, and other such wonderful things. We're talking about a new concept for a railroad to link to other railroads to expand the potential of oil development in the Uintah Basin. Joining us for our conversation is Commissioner Greg Miles from Duchesne County, a county that's very much affected by oil production. We also have Mark Hemphill, who is the Vice President of the Rio Grande Pacific Railroad. And we also have Brad Horrocks, who is a commissioner from Uintah County, the other county that plays. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us. Can you just tell me a little bit about the project and its genesis?
This has been an ongoing discussion for several years in the basin, and we've had a transportation disconnect. We haven't had a way to get goods and commodities in and out of the basin, and we have oil that we need to get out of the basin, and we have highways to do that, and not freeways, we have highways, and it's been tough to facilitate our industry and to give them the transportation that they need. And so, you know, the 2012 study, Mark Hemphill was actually involved in that.
Yes.
UDOT did it.
Yes.
UDOT study. And
so maybe this is a question for you. One would think on the surface that expanding a highway and making it a freeway is an easier task than creating a railroad route that hasn't existed before. Why the railroad is the decision?
Well, I think I've spent 38 years in the railroad business, and many of these, the question you ask is very common, and it happens in many places in the United States, of what's the most economic and environmentally sound way to move freight and the safest way to move freight, and the answer is railroads are by far and away, for heavy freight volumes, railroads are more cost-effective, more economical, more environmentally sound, and less energy-intensive means of moving freight in large quantities. Many counties and many ports and states have looked at this same problem. They have isolated, or they're about to lose their railroad line that they've had, and it results in the loss of their industry. I did a lot of work, for example, for the Port of Coos Bay, Oregon. They had a 125-mile-long rail line connecting them to the national network, and their lumber mills all depended on that railroad line. And as the railroad line fell into disrepair, those lumber mills were all going to go out of business, and that was the end of thousands of jobs and the tax base in those counties. And in that case, the counties, the Port District, and the state of Oregon came together with the federal government to save that rail line and save those jobs, because trucking is much more expensive than railroads. Truck hauls, on average, one railroad car of freight is equivalent to 4 truckloads. A train, so if a train is 100 cars long, that's 400 truckloads of freight on one train. And so it provides a huge cost advantage for people who want to use the railroad, and those might be lumber mills, they're oil producers, or farmers that ship hay, or animal feed, or anyone else that can ship large volumes of freight. And generally those are the agriculture, the mining, and the extractive industries, timber, things of that nature.
I guess the question though still remains why it's a more efficient way to move things, and I can buy that argument. Isn't the cost of infrastructure of building a railroad just exponentially larger than like expanding a road or improving a highway?
Not at all. Actually, railroad is cheaper than building a 2-lane highway. If you were building a new 2-lane highway over a mountain pass, you'd probably be spending $8 to $10 million a mile. Railroad will be somewhat less than that, and a railroad can haul a lot more than a single 2-lane highway can as well.
Do you have to build 2 rails so they can pass each other? Or?
No, you build sidings, what are called sidings, at about, an interval might be 6 miles, it might be 10 miles in between sidings, and the 2 trains meet and pass at those sidings. And otherwise, it's a single track in between. A single track railroad like the one being proposed for the Uintah Basin can easily do 10 trains a day, 12 trains a day. So.
About how long? Obviously no longer than the siding, right?
Yeah, no longer than the side. Well, sometimes they are, but generally, the length of the train is going to be dependent on what the connecting railroads are willing to take, and they've talked between 100 and 130 car trains, which is what they typically haul in Utah right now. Union Pacific right now will actually run some 200 car long trains in Utah, so I don't think we'll be that long, but in that range of 100 to 120 cars.
So this question to the other two of you guys, how does this help? I mean, we're already shipping, it seems like, as much oil as you can produce. Aren't the Wasatch Front refineries running at capacity?
They're running at capacity, running about 85, 90,000 barrels a day.
About 75,000 to 80,000, depending on the season.
And so we're capped out on what we can sell. You know, if we are going to increase production, we've got to have a way to go somewhere else with it, you know, and this railroad idea was to get the oil to the East Coast and have another market and expand our production.
Well, without the railroad, the oil production is going to increase in the basin anyway. The producers out in the basin now are all looking at expansion plans. The ones we've talked to have all been quite forthcoming about that they intend to increase their production and truck the oil. And that oil would be trucked mostly on Highway 191 over Indian Creek to the Helper Price area.
So this region has had a boom or bust. I mean, this has been going on since I first became politically aware in the 70s. Is that, you know, oil production ramps up and then they think the oil's out and then they go deeper and they find it and it comes up, and so it's been extremely cyclical. Does this help flatten out that demand a little bit?
I think it does drastically, and you know, we look at other oil fields in the United States, and for us it seems like we boom later and we bust earlier than the other oil fields. And so, you know, comparatively, we can't dictate what the price of oil is going to be, but if we could take some of that bottom out of the roller coaster ride and stabilize things, that would encourage companies to stay here, to invest more money here, and you know, that ultimately helps our economy. We have two staples in the basin. One is oil and the other is ag. And ag's always going to be there, you know. I think Brad and I, you know, have lived here all of our lives, and we know ag. We grew up on a ranch or a farm, and the other is oil. And we've definitely had connections there.
So why not a pipeline? Does a railroad provide more opportunity or more diversity than just piping it to a terminal?
Well, there's two reasons on why not a pipeline. The first is that the Uintah Basin produces a waxy crude that's technically challenging for a pipeline. And the Chevron at one time in the past had a waxy crude pipeline and had a lot of technical difficulties keeping that pipeline active. And there's not a lot of enthusiasm for trying to do that again among the oil producers. And if there was, they would have done it by now. The other challenge of the pipeline is it's limited on its capacity. So if you wanted to expand production beyond that, then you have building a second pipeline. And it also hauls just one commodity one way, in this case oil. So the railroad, on the other hand, is not only just going to haul oil, it will haul frac sand coming into the basin and tubular steel product. We really hope that the railroad has a big boon for the farmers and ranchers in the Uintah Basin, that we can bring in animal feed at low cost from the Midwest, corn and soy for animal feed, and bring out hay that gives them the farmers a much bigger market for the hay that they produce.
Yeah, gilsonite
As well.
Corn.
Yeah. Lumber
Phosphate,
for building
there's
houses.
chances of the phosphate. You know, they have a pipeline that goes over the mountain, but there might be someday that phosphate will be put on it. There's endless opportunities what can happen with the railroad. I think it will diversify our economy enough that we'll stabilize it. It will create jobs, create opportunities, lumber, building. You know, we got tremendous industry out here. You know, machine shops, some of the best in the world. You know, and the opportunity for these guys to maybe make a product, to get the product in here, to make it, to sell it, to ship it out. This railroad I think will diversify our economy from top to bottom.
And I think one of the things I'd like to say is, you know, there's been those at the state level that have been critical of basin governments for not diversifying their economy. Well, that's kind of like telling somebody in West Texas they ought to invest in mittens. You know, I mean, we have oil, you know, it's estimated that the easy oil is over 3 billion barrels is in the ground, in the basin. And we have the oil, we have the ag, but without the oil, we really have no driver to our economy.
Okay, well, this is a good point to take a break. We're going to pause now for a commercial break, and when we come back, we'll start talking about the roots. We'll be back in a moment on the County Seat. Welcome back to the County Seat. We are talking today about a bold undertaking to build a new railway in the Uintah Basin to connect the commodities of petroleum to not only the Wasatch Front, but the rest of the world. So why go south with the railroad instead of going to the west? I mean, you've got Ogden's a huge railroad yard. Wouldn't it be better to tap in that direction?
I think I can answer that. I've worked on a lot of the original studies that looked at rail routes into the basin, and more than 29, I think, routes were looked at, potential routes. And the Uintah Basin is geologically and geographically challenging. It's ringed by mountains. And the Wasatch Range to the west and the Uintah Range to the north and the Wasatch Plateau and Roan Plateau to the south are big, huge barriers for railroads. And railroads want fairly mild grades. They can't go up as steep a grade as a highway can. And if you look at the highways going into the basin, there's just two highways there into the basin, a US 40 going east-west and 191 going north-south. There aren't any other roads in and out of the basin that are paved because the geography is so challenging. So all those routes were looked at, and it turns into an equation of both the economics of can the railroad pay for itself, because this is all going to be private money, 100% private money building this railroad. So can those private financing be paid for? And secondly, is it something that's environmentally permittable, and can it go through an environmental process and not have unreasonable impacts on the environment? And also, it doesn't want to go through places that are built up, built up areas. It's difficult to build a railroad through an urban area. So none of the routes that were looked at going to the west towards the Wasatch Front were feasible. They were too expensive and too environmentally challenging. The best routes were looked at. It came down to 4 routes, 3 that are very similar to each other, that go to the south, and 1 that goes to the east to Craig, Colorado.
So if you go to the south, does that cut off oil coming into the Wasatch Front? Does that raise the cost or decrease the availability of oil on the Wasatch Front?
No, the commercial business plan for the railway does not really look at oil for the Wasatch Front. That oil will probably continue to be trucked just as at present from the basin to the refineries in the Salt Lake City, Woods Cross area. I don't think that's going to change. This railway is to provide oil transportation that goes to the Gulf Coast, to refineries on the Gulf Coast, or in the Midwest, or on the Pacific Coast. That's what the railway is to do, is not that 75,000 barrels a day that's going to the Wasatch Front, but oil that the producers want to take that would have to take by truck down to existing railroad lines in the Price, Wellington, Helper area.
So, of course, that could go either direction, though. I guess you go over. You come out of Helper to get to the west, because that is the only rail that goes west out of there.
That's correct. Come over Soldier Summit and then down into the Utah Valley there, or go eastward into Colorado.
Is there a connection to go south once you get down into Spanish Fork? Or do you have to go clear to Salt Lake and then?
No, there's a rail line that comes out of the Union Pacific Railroad, goes south from Provo through Spanish Fork down to Lindell near Delta, Utah, and then ultimately to Las Vegas and Los Angeles.
Okay, that sounds good. So what are the routes that you've boiled it down. You start with 29. I've really only heard conversation personally about 3 routes. What are they? And am I wrong? Are there more still under consideration?
There are 4 under consideration. So the process is for building a new railroad in the United States is for a common carrier railroad, which means under the authority of the federal government, which regulates railroads economically in the U.S. That is through an agency of the federal government called the Surface Transportation Board. It regulates all railroad economics aspects in the U.S. So to build a railroad, you have to have STB authority. To abandon a railroad, STB authority. And the STB chooses the route for you. The coalition in this case has proposed 4 routes that it deems feasible to the STB. The STB, through its environmental process, will either choose one of those routes as the route that it permits to be built, or it could say none of these routes are acceptable and rejects them all.
Wow, that would be a lot of effort for nothing.
It would be.
Do you guys consider this a gamble at the county level?
Yeah, there's got to be a little bit of gamble in it. There's no doubt about it, but it's, we have to do something, and this is a viable product, a project that we can do that will hopefully fix our economy here in the basin, stabilize it for the generations to come. Everything's a gamble. I've been in the livestock business and everything else. Everything's a gamble, but this is very doable. You look at the economics of it, the feasibility of it, and what we've done the last year and a half. I feel like I'm very confident that it's doable to do.
So the routes head different directions. You build the railway in the basin, it would seem that 191, the route out 191 to Helper, would benefit Duchesne County more, and the Craig route would probably benefit Vern a little bit more.
No, I don't think so. The oil is, the oil we have, production areas that are both in, and we just call it the basin. We can call it Duchesne County or Uintah County. We're all here together. But no, it may be a little bit to go to Craig, but that's not, whatever works best, whatever's feasible to do that we can make work is going to benefit both our counties. I feel like
as well as Carbon County and all the other counties that are surrounding
the state of Utah,
it.
the whole state of Utah.
Absolutely.
If we get this oil out of here, the state of Utah is going to see a benefit from mineral lease money that's more than we're going to see.
Yeah.
The Sitla schools, the trust lands there, and their holdings they have out here with the mineral lease money that they receive off of it. This is a basin project, but it is a state of Utah project.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to know what those routes are, because I'm sure people are curious. I've had people actually comment that I've got cabin property over 191. Am I going to have a railroad out my backyard? So we'll be back to address those issues. Where's it coming on the county seat? We'll be right back.
This is going to do some things for the Uintah Basin, for the state of Utah that's never been done, and economically and to help our communities. This is a huge game changer for our communities. We've actually got 4 routes now that went to the Surface Transportation Board, and the Surface Transportation Board actually is the entity that will make the selection as to which of those routes they believe has the least amount of environmental consequence and those kind of things.
Again, a quote from Mike McKee, who's the executive director of the 7-County Coalition. Gentlemen, let's talk about the routes. Everybody wants to know, where's this new railroad going to go? So what are they?
4 routes, going from east to west. The Craig route goes and reaches the Union Pacific Railroad near Craig, Colorado. And then there's 3 similar routes that go west and south, all ending up at the same location in Emma Park, connecting with Union Pacific and BNSF Railway at the top of the Price River Canyon. And those are called the Indian Canyon, the Whitmore Park, and the Wells Draw routes. And they're each are similar, but they have common ends, but they're different in the middle and go through different areas.
So different alignments to get down the route. Well, hasn't there been some recently in the last few weeks I've read that somebody's made an environmental challenge to the Craig route. Somebody doesn't want it or something. What is one of them in jeopardy?
The BLM has some concerns about the Craig route, and I don't know if it's finalized yet, but we will probably make a comment to the STB.
Now you've got a federal agency that's saying, oh, wait a minute, we got some concerns, but the decision ultimately is with another federal agency, right?
Correct.
Okay, so this route's still in play?
Yes, at the moment it is, yes. All 4 routes are on the table still.
I keep hearing private money being involved in this. What is the public-private partnership on this particular project?
Well, public-private partnerships are very common on large infrastructure projects, particularly rail projects. In many states, I've worked on them. They've been successful because it satisfies what the public needs is what the private needs. So in this particular case, the public side, the 7-County Coalition, through the CIB has provided $27.9 million to do the environmental impact statement and the initial conceptual engineering studies for the railway. The private partner, which is Drexel Hamilton Infrastructure Partners, a New York equity firm, and ourselves, Rio Grande Pacific Corporation, we're a railroad corporation. We provide the $1.5 billion in private capital that will actually build the railway after the coalition provides the environmental permitting.
Does everybody get their money back?
Well,
You know, as
Yeah,
far
I
as,
hope
as-
so.
You know, as far as the the public end of it there, yes, we're going to get our money back. It's going to come back in mineral lease money. It's a great investment. You look at the investment that the opportunity that we have to create the revenue that's going to keep, the state of Utah running.
absolutely. The numbers I've seen, that there was a study done a few years ago by the state of Utah that looked at what the tax benefit was of increased oil and gas production in the Uintah Basin. And for an additional 200,000 barrels a year of oil production, that's almost $1 billion a year in royalty payments. And generally that splits out about a third, 1/3 to the state, 1/3 to private property owners, and 1/3 to the Ute tribe.
Well, this would have paid for itself in a year, wouldn't it?
It just about does.
Wow. We'll come back and we'll finish things up here on the county seat. You are watching a great show. We'll be right back.
This rail project, I believe, is going to be a benefit to all the citizens in the state of Utah because it will bring in additional revenues to the state of Utah. When we look at, for example, education, there's SITLA properties, and one of the largest drivers for SITLA funding has been the oil and gas industry, and be able to access those revenues and be able to help our school children, it's a benefit there as well.
Another interesting thought from Mike McKee, Executive Director of the 7-County Coalition. Welcome back to the county seat. Who is going to benefit from this? I mean, obviously, you guys are standing, the railroad stands to make money, Duchesne, Uintah County. Who else?
The school kids of Utah, there's studies out there that show 20% of every student is funded from the basin out here, mineral lease monies, oil and gas. So it's something that's the school kids of the state of Utah. Is going to be
would they be one of the biggest beneficiaries?
Yeah. Well, and
Absolutely.
I think the Community Impact Board, the funds for mineral lease money that feed that Community Impact Board that benefits a great portion of the state.
How many projects have been done through the Community Impact Board? I dare bet in rural Utah, 60% of all the fire stations in the last 10 years that's been built has got money from the Community Impact Board. Yeah. Roads, water lines, sewers, water treatment plants. There's as many as 12, 15 applications every month that are applied to get this mineral lease money that, last things I'd heard, about 70% of it all comes from Uintah Basin, the basin out here. And so rural Utah, the state of Utah, the whole state of Utah, the colleges.
How far into this project are we? It's now just becoming publicly on the radar, and how many more steps are there to go? What's next?
So we're roughly a year into the project since the CIB first provided funding to start the environmental impact statement. The next step on it is right now I'm working with our financial partners and with the Ute tribe to commercialize the railway, which is to obtain the financial funding from the private sector to build the railway, pay for its construction, design, engineering, real estate acquisition. All that comes from private money. So we're working on that to obtain the market commitments from shippers that will use the railway that will ultimately pay for the railway. That's our next step, is the commercialization. Meanwhile, the coalition is working very hard on the environmental impact statement with the STB. Following the environmental impact statement and commercialization, we'll finance the railway and then start construction. And this construction, we hope to start that in January of 2021.
So how big a project is this? That's the last question. How big is this just you guys?
No.
Boy.
It takes a lot of people to kick this off, and Mike McKee, he's gone the distance. That guy's always on the road, meeting with individuals and keeping things rolling. And on the private side, Mark Hemphill and Drexel Hamilton, and 7 board members of the Infrastructure Coalition. We keep running, and it takes a lot behind the scenes.
Well, you have to have a lot of buy-in to make it work.
Absolutely. Any project like this takes a lot of buy-in. We've had great feedback from all of Utah's, not only at the county level with the county commissioners and the 7-County Coalition, but with the federal legislators, with Senator Lee, Senator Romney, Congressman Bishop, Stewart.
Governor.
Yeah.
We've had a lot of buy-in with all our political entities, and it's a great project. And it's going to take a lot.
Well,
Congressman
gentlemen,
Curtis as well.
we will probably have to visit this again because we're just fresh out of time. But this has been very enlightening. Thank you for taking the time to meet with us today. Appreciate it very much. thank you for tuning in and inviting us into your home. Remember, this is a good conversation. You can find it on social media. It's very easy to share, and you can tell your friends about it and start a conversation in your neighborhood. And we'll look for you next week on the County Seat.
Hi, Mom.